Today I will be presenting on the history of missions in China. This is a history that defies missiological claims and principles, for in it we see the gospel moving through unconventional, non-traditional ways. Christianity spread in light of and in spite of heretical teaching, mass persecution, and drastic ideological and cultural differences. To begin, we must discuss what was happening in China while Jesus walked the earth. During this time, the ideological, philosophical, and religious roots of China were being established. Confucianism, Buddhism, and Taoism played a key role in defining the culture of China from that time on, even until today. These ideologies would make it difficult for Christianity to take root later on. This can specifically be seen through the influence of Buddhism. Buddhists emphasize the virtuous and enlightened life lived according to the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, in contrast to any sort of God that demands submission or obedience. Buddhist thought does not provide an understanding of depravity and a need for salvation. Furthermore, Buddhism's influence in China at times even squashed out Christianity completely. For example, in 845 AD, Emperor Wu Zhao issued an edict proscribing Buddhism, which caused mass persecution and almost a total wipeout of Christian influence. The first actual Christian influence came from the Nestorians. Due to their contradiction with Rome, in which Nestorian teachings were condemned as a heresy, Nestorianism moved east. It was this movement that led to their eventual spread to China. Nestorianism found favor under the Tang Dynasty and with the Mongol Empire. From 636 to 1368, Nestorianism had a foothold in China. Now to describe some of the key missiological leaders in the movement of Christianity. The first that needs to be mentioned is Matteo Ricci. He was the first Jesuit missionary in China, and he led the way in emphasizing education and cultural accommodation amongst the Chinese people. He went so far as to even wear the clothing of a Buddhist monk in order to win favor with the Chinese. Ricci's methods were not always understood by the Catholic papacy, but it did create some success for missions in China. Secondly, we must mention Hudson Taylor, arguably the most famous missionary to China. Taylor's methods were also very unconventional. He lived among the Chinese, ate their food, spoke their language, he even wore his hair in pigtails. His great heart for the Chinese people created the China Inland Mission, which has greatly impacted missions still to this day. The final missiological figure which needs to be mentioned is Watchman Nee. He, among other impactful Chinese leaders, has done much for the indigenization of Christianity amongst the Chinese people. He established the group known as the Little Flock and was one of the first well-known Christian leaders in China, even during times that were not favorable to Christianity. He, in fact, was imprisoned when communism rose to power in 1949, yet his influence and that of men like him has led China where it is today. Now, a few key events must be mentioned. The first is when Tai Tsung became the emperor in 649 AD. This was what actually enabled Christianity to first make an appearance in China. For under his leadership, the capital city of Chang'an became very open to new ideas, giving Nestorianism an opportunity to thrive. Nestorianism's influence can be read in the Nestorian stone. However, many years later, after the end of the Tartar dynasty, the unfriendly Ming dynasty came to power, which expelled Christianity from China for almost 200 years. This is significant, yet it did not stop Christianity from coming back again. Another important event is that of the Chinese rights controversy in 1724. After some success by the Jesuit mission in China, there came about a dispute over whether or not Chinese converts could continue to practice rites of their Chinese culture. The papacy ruled that they could not, and because this was seen as too much foreign influence, the Jesuit mission was expelled, leaving China with little to no foreign missions. Yet Christianity came once again with the Protestant mission in the 19th century. A key event in this time frame was the establishment of CIM in 1865. This non-denominational missions organization defied the traditional way of doing missions and has laid the groundwork for many future missions organizations to follow. The last key event to note is one that has really led us up to the present age. In 1949, the Communist Revolution once again expelled all foreign missions. However, this time Christianity was indigenizing among the Chinese people. Despite persecution, Chinese Christianity has grown rapidly in the past 75 years. Yet the ideological issues that the Communist Revolution has raised still create challenges today. As you can see, Christianity is prevalent in China today. It makes about 2.4% of the total population in China. In fact, the Christian faith has grown so much that China is actually becoming an ascending country, creating missions movements of their own. Yet the need of China is still great. Not only are there many unreached people in China, it is still difficult to bring the gospel there. Furthermore, the Chinese church has never looked the way one would imagine. The influence of the theology that laid the Christian foundation in China can be seen, and there is a need for Chinese churches to grow in maturity and doctrine. Specifically, there seems to be a growing number of prosperity gospel believers in China, which is one of many theological challenges affecting the church today. China is still steeped in those drastic ideological differences, which has made it difficult to spread the gospel for thousands of years. The political situation is more open, however, it is still not easy. Missions work in China is facing the wake of the Communist Revolution, which has indoctrinated many of the Chinese people. Ultimately, what can be learned through the history of missions in China is that God is the active agent of missions. For no person, even if they were an expert in missiology, could have ever come up with the way in which Christianity has taken root in China. It has defied all concepts of methodology, going with heresy, politics, persecution, unconventional means, and more. Thus it can be seen that God is the one who is on the move. Therefore, we must continue to trust that God is leading his people to him, and we are to simply follow him in his mission. Finally, as the situation in China is still somewhat dangerous to Christians, not many organizations publicize their work in China, but one that is doing much to help the Chinese is the English Language Institute China, ELIC. This is an explicitly Christian organization that reaches the Chinese through the means of education.